Nigeria, the giant of Africa, seems to have a complicated relationship with its national power grid. Yes, the power grid collapsed again on the 11th of December 2024, and each collapse leaves millions in darkness, businesses in disarray, and the economy bleeding $29 billion a year, according to the World Bank. In the last video we made about the national grid, we talked about what it means for the grid to be collapsed. And in this video, we will talk about why this is happening. So, let's talk. Nigeria's power infrastructure is ancient. Yes, some transmission lines and substations have been around for a long time. These aging relics are expected to handle modern demands, but unsurprisingly, they fail often and spectacularly. The Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, admits that for every 100 megawatts pumped into the grid, nearly 8 megawatts vanish. So where do they go? Perhaps they're having a party in an alternate dimension, or maybe they are victims of a poor maintenance and outdated equipment. Years of underinvestment have left the grid susceptible to tripping when demand fluctuates unexpectedly. Vandalism adds to the chaos. In the last 2 years alone, 108 attacks were recorded on transmission towers and lines. Now let's talk about generation capacity. Nigeria, home to over 200 million people, only generates and distributes 1/3, about 4,000 megawatts of its installed capacity of 13,500 megawatts. To put this into perspective, South Africa, with a population of 1/3 the size of Nigeria's population, generates 10 times more electricity. Nigeria could learn a thing or two from its southern neighbor, or at least borrow some power during emergencies. What is truly baffling is that Nigeria sits on the world's 7th largest gas reserves. Yet, we're generating a fraction of what we could. More than 75% of our electricity comes from the gas-fired plants in the south, while the remainder comes from hydroelectric stations in the north. And the centralization of power generation does not help at all. Electricity generated from individual firms gets fed into the national grid, which is then distributed through 11 regional distribution companies. But with so much leakage, inefficiency, and sabotage along the way, it's no surprise that by the time the electricity gets to your home, it's barely strong enough to power your smartphone. Nigeria's electricity sector was privatized more than a decade ago, but the grid remains as unreliable as ever. Last year, however, the federal government allowed states to generate and transmit their own power. Lagos, the commercial nerve center, and a few other states have jumped at that opportunity. Lagos, for instance, is already developing independent power markets. Could this be the light at the end of the tunnel? Maybe. Decentralized power generation might reduce dependence on the decaying national grid, but unless states invest in robust infrastructure and secure the power systems from vandals, we might just end up decentralizing the same old problems. The power grid is a major obstacle to Nigeria's economic growth and foreign investment. Fixing the Nigeria's power grid is not a pipe dream, it is a necessity. It requires bold investment in modern infrastructure, proactive maintenance, and aggressive anti-vandalism measures. Decentralizing power generation is a step in the right direction, but it's only a band-aid on a gaping wound. The question is not about if Nigeria can afford to fix its power grid. The question is if Nigeria can afford not to. After all, if the giant of Africa keeps tumbling in darkness, how can it ever hope to lead the continent into the light?